In this movie, Herschel, a struggling ditch digger, moved to the USA after his wife passed away. He worked in a pickle factory, but got trapped in a giant vat of pickles. 100 years later, in 2019, Herschel was discovered alive and shocked by how much the world had changed. He met his great-grandson, Ben, and tried to live in this modern world. In 1919, in Eastern Europe, a Jewish man named Herschel struggled to survive as a ditch digger. His job did not pay well, and he had to spend most of his small earnings on new shovels because they broke frequently. Herschel felt unhappy with his life until he met Sarah, who was upset about the price of fish at the market. He tried to talk to her, but she left, clearly annoyed. Despite this, Herschel didn't give up. He worked hard and saved enough money to buy her some good fish. When Sarah tasted the fish, she agreed to spend time with him. Herschel and Sarah began to see each other often and realized they had much in common, including the fact that both of their parents had been killed by Russian Cossacks. They liked to visit Sarah's favorite spot in the woods, where she shared her wish to someday afford their own gravestone. In return, Herschel shared his dream of trying seltzer water. A few months later, they got married. Sadly, their plans for a new life were destroyed when Russian Cossacks attacked their village. With their home in ruins, Herschel and Sarah decided to move to the USA for a fresh start. Herschel thought the Americans were friendly and treated him better than the Russians, not realizing that people still used anti-Semitic terms when talking about him. Soon, he got a job at a pickle factory, where he earned a nickel for every 10 rats he killed. As months went by, Herschel worked hard hunting rats and saved enough money to buy 2 graves so that he and Sarah could be together even after they died. Not long after, Sarah became pregnant. Herschel promised their child would be strong and successful. One day, while chasing some sneaky rats, Herschel accidentally slipped and fell into a large vat of pickle. To make things worse, the factory announced that it was closing for sanitary reasons. All the vats were covered. Herschel was trapped inside. 100 years later, in 2019, the factory building was abandoned. 2 teenagers were playing around the area with a drone, which accidentally flew into the factory and knocked off the vat's lid. The teens went inside to retrieve the drone, and as they moved the lid, Herschel suddenly sat up, looking alive and well. Soon, everyone in the city was talking about Herschel. At a press conference, scientists explained why Herschel was perfectly preserved, and people accepted it as reasonable. Afterward, Herschel was taken to the hospital for a checkup and was found to be in good health. However, when he learned that Sarah had died, he refused to believe it and became violent, so they had to strap him to a stretcher. After a thorough background check, Herschel was told he had one living descendant in Brooklyn who agreed to pick him up. Moments later, Herschel met his great-grandson Ben, who looked just like him. They hugged, realizing they had finally found a family member again. Then Herschel left the building and saw the city for the first time. He was amazed and shocked at how much the world had changed. When Ben stopped a taxi, Herschel was initially startled and thought he might have to fight, but Ben quickly helped him get into the car. Once they reached Ben's apartment, Herschel was even more surprised. Although Ben was only middle class, Herschel thought his great-grandson lived in luxury, especially when he learned that Ben owned 25 pairs of socks. Ben invited Herschel to stay as long as he wanted and offered him a drink. Herschel was shocked again when Ben offered seltzer water. There was a machine in the kitchen to make it, and Ben showed Herschel how to use it. Herschel was thrilled to try seltzer water for the first time. Next, Ben had Alexa play an old song. After a bit of hesitation, Herschel joined in the silly dance just for fun. Later, they spent the afternoon exploring the city, trying various foods and new technologies. Herschel was puzzled by being called a hipster, and was surprised to see couples of different races together. When they returned to the apartment, Herschel asked Ben what his job was, thinking he might be a doctor or lawyer. However, Ben was a freelance app developer. He showed Herschel his tablet and explained that he had been working on an app called Boop Bop for the past 5 years. The app checks the ethics of companies when buying their product. Ben had not sent the app to any potential investors yet because it was not finished. He was still stressed over some details, like the colors of the logo. Suddenly, Herschel asked Ben if the man on the David Bowie poster was his father. When Ben said no, Herschel wondered why there were no family pictures around. Ben then took out an old family photo album, which made Herschel very emotional. After seeing a picture of Sarah, Herschel learned that she had a son. He looked at the modern pictures and asked Ben about his parents. Ben looked uncomfortable and said his parents had died in an accident. Herschel suggested they go to the cemetery to pray for them. Ben felt uneasy and explained that he was not religious, which disappointed Herschel. Feeling sorry for the old man, Ben decided to take Herschel to the family graves the next day. However, Herschel was heartbroken to find the cemetery in a poor state, cried when he saw Sarah's neglected tombstone and began to pray for her, asking Ben to join him. But Ben preferred to look at his phone. At that moment, some workers arrived to put up a billboard for Russian vodka right on top of the graves. Seeing the word vodka made Herschel think the Cossacks who destroyed his home were behind this, making him furious. He confronted the workers and asked them to stop, but they ignored him. Herschel got even angrier and attacked the worker. He managed to knock out a few. Soon he was surrounded. Ben tried to help but got beaten up too. This incident led to their arrest, and Ben had to spend a lot of money to bail them out. When they returned to the apartment, Herschel insisted on taking down the billboard, but Ben reminded him it would cost money he did not have. They argued, and Herschel accused Ben of being a coward and delaying his app presentation with excuses. Ben sent some emails and was surprised to find a possible investor wanting to meet. Later that day, Ben went to meet with the investors but was turned down. They liked Ben's invention, but his criminal record was all over the internet. They felt he was a poor choice to represent an app focused on business ethics. When Ben got home, he blamed Herschel for making his life worse. Herschel did not understand Ben's ideas and suggested they start a pickle business instead. This made Ben very angry, and he said Sarah would be ashamed of Herschel. He also pointed out that Herschel could not do anything in the modern world without him. Hurt by these accusations, Herschel vowed to build a pickle empire on his own and to make his deceased relatives proud by taking down the billboard. Before leaving, Herschel told Ben he was a disgrace to the family. Afterward, Herschel went to the grocery store to buy cucumbers. They were too expensive. While wandering around trying to come up with a plan, he saw a bin outside the store filled with packed cucumbers. Quickly grabbed them and had an idea. He began searching through dumpsters around the city for jars, salt, and other supplies to make his own cart. But the cucumbers in jars let the rain fill them and made pickle. Later on, Herschel set up a pickle stand by the roadside. Two men were immediately drawn to his product because it was local, natural, and very cheap. They were also amused by Herschel's quirky requests, like asking customers to return the jars. They thought he was environmentally friendly and made a video for social media. Soon, Herschel's pickle cart went viral, and he appeared all over the news and social media as people from all over Brooklyn came to buy his pickle. Ben saw the news about Herschel's success and became very jealous, especially because he was struggling with ideas for his new app. His jealousy made him so bitter that when he saw Herschel explain how he made the pickles in one of the videos, Ben called the health department and filed a complaint, saying that Herschel was using products from the trash. Moments later, the health department arrived at the pickle cart to shut it down. Herschel had to pay $12,000. Not knowing what to do next, Herschel's first two customers suggested he hire interns since he wouldn't have to pay them. Herschel compared this to slavery, but he still liked the idea. For the interviews, he invited the interns to the park where he lived. They talked about their experience and skills, but Herschel focused on making sure they were strong enough for the job. Once Herschel picked a few interns, he taught them everything he knew about making pickles. With their help, they developed proper methods that the health department approved. The interns also helped him sell the pickles on a larger scale, and the business quickly recovered. Soon, Herschel earned enough money to buy the billboard and take it down. He also made his employees clean the graveyard. Meanwhile, Ben bitterly noticed that Herschel was becoming successful again. The investors who had turned him down were now interested in the pickle business. Ben also watched old videos of his graduation, where his parents had given him money to start his business because they believed in him. This made Ben feel worse. At that moment, Herschel showed up at Ben's apartment with proof of his success and said he still wanted to help Ben because they were family. When Ben turned him down, Herschel called him stupid, even worse than the Polish, who were already considered stupid. Ben realized that Herschel held many old-fashioned and bigoted views and challenged him to create his own Twitter account. Later that evening, with an intern's help, Herschel posted controversial statements about women, religion, and the queer community on Twitter. The next day, angry people gathered around the pickle shop, protesting against Herschel's views and calling for a boycott of his pickle business. Later that day, even the interns quit and joined the protesters. Despite this, Herschel stuck to his opinions and soon gained support from conservative groups who saw him as a symbol of free speech and empowerment. Thanks to this support, Herschel stayed successful and even appeared on far-right TV shows as a hero. Ben watched all this and felt more resentful. One day, Herschel was chosen to debate a college professor about ethics. He made many horrible comments about women, but the public admired him for his bravery and wanted him to run for office. During the debate, a disguised Ben asked Herschel about his views on Christianity. Herschel then claimed that the Virgin Mary invented Christianity to cover up her wrongdoings and called anyone who believed in Jesus an idiot. This caused his supporters to turn against him, and they began chasing him through the streets of New York. Herschel had to hide in an alley to escape. Later that evening, Herschel saw a news report about protests across America demanding a boycott of him. To make things worse, authorities had dug up his past to deport him back to Eastern Europe. Since they couldn't find the paperwork for Herschel's arrival, they had an excuse to revoke his citizenship. Herschel was declared an illegal fugitive, and people were asked to report him to the police. With no other option, Herschel broke into Ben's apartment for help. He didn't want to return to Europe, but was willing to go to Canada to start a new life. Initially, Ben refused to help, but he changed his mind when Herschel promised never to contact him again after this favor. The two drove to the Canadian border and had to walk through the woods to enter the country illegally. Along the way, Ben accidentally cut his palm, and Herschel used a piece of his clothes to bandage the wound. At night, Herschel hugged Ben to keep him warm, and Ben found himself enjoying the time spent with Herschel without business worries. The next morning, they reached the border, had to hide from Border Patrol. While waiting for the guards to leave, Ben confessed that he had boycotted Herschel's business several times. He hoped Herschel would forgive him, but instead, Herschel punched him in the face. As Ben fell unconscious, the commotion attracted the officer's attention, so Herschel ran away with Ben's bag. Finding a razor and clothes in the bag, Herschel shaved his beard, changed his outfit, and used Ben's ID to cross the border. Meanwhile, the officers arrested Ben, thinking he was Herschel. At his trial, Ben's case was treated as a joke when his lawyer tried to argue that he wasn't Herschel, using the lack of a beard as evidence. Ben was sent to Eastern Europe, where he ended up cold and alone in a town where no one spoke English. He eventually found someone who pointed him to a synagogue, and though he was not happy, he stayed there for the night. Back in Brooklyn, Herschel felt terrible for losing his family. He went to Ben's apartment and found a family photo album from which a piece of paper fell. Paper was a drawing Ben had made as a child of his parents, calling them Boop and Bop. Herschel realized that Ben had always wanted to honor his parents. At the synagogue, the men asked Ben to join them for prayer because they were missing one person for the ritual. Ben agreed out of obligation and became emotional when he heard prayers for deceased family members. Suddenly, Herschel appeared before him, apologized for his actions, and said that Ben was exactly the kind of descendant he had hoped for and that his parents would be proud of him. Ben also apologized, and after they reconciled, they visited Sarah's favorite spot. It wasn't as beautiful as it used to be. They agreed to work together on their next business. Herschel would pickle more than just cucumbers, and Ben would handle the online marketing so they could sell worldwide. Later, they returned to Brooklyn and visited Sarah's grave. This time, Ben prayed alongside Herschel.